listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Bob Schlehuber.
And my name is Jamal Thomas. Let's get ready to go against the grain. So we have another good show for you today. The first hour, we'll be diving into the results of Mini Super Tuesday, as my manager, or as the producer said, Mini Super Tuesday Blues. Joe Biden had another good result last night, winning Idaho, Mississippi, Missouri, and, of course, the big prize of Michigan. Sanders was able to take North Dakota and maintains a modest lead in Washington state. Now, considering Sanders was expected to lose all of these states, all in all, it wasn't too bad.
I like that.
Yeah.
Good spin there.
Thank you.
We don't even have the Washington results yet either.
Yeah, so we haven't had those yet. Yang is back in the news, grifting on CNN with the person who he is backing. And we'll also be getting into further Super Tuesday. We'll also be getting into the Super Tuesday results. But first, I want to start here for the moment, and I'm going to hand this over to Bob for a second. What did you think of the Super Tuesday results? Do you think that Sanders... I looked at this, and I was a little bit hopeful for this because I thought, well, he didn't outright lose, and not outright lose for the most part. He just needs to survive until he gets to the debates.
Yeah, I think so much of it's quite interesting, the math and how you look at things. Some of the Sanders supporters were saying, look, to get the nomination, to get the majority of delegates, Biden still needs 51% of the remaining the delegates, basically, and Sanders only needs 56%.
Right.
So it's like, when 56, 51, it's like basically a coin flip at this point. So how you flip it or look at it, obviously a long way to go in the primary process here. Obviously, I don't think Bernie Sanders is going to drop out. It seems like he has enough money and clout at this point, and if they don't have to do campaign rallies or door knocking anymore because of the coronavirus, that's going to save quite a bit of money to allow them to kind of continue to stay in this race. And I think it's important for Bernie Sanders to stay in this race because he is showing that there are a lot of people out there that don't want just the Joe Bidens of the world. I hate using establishment of the world because it's kind of turned against a lot of people from the outside that are saying, oh, everything that people that don't rock with the Democratic Party need a Bernie Sanders to say, look, we want to participate in your primaries. We want to turn out in your primaries. But your party does not stand for what we stand for. And when you go into these conventions, at those conventions, they have their rules-making committees and they have platform-making committees that basically said this is the Democratic platform. And if Bernie Sanders was to drop out, well, then no one's going to actually challenge anybody there. And it's going to basically run away with a lot of these old Obama people, a lot of Clinton people, a lot of people from Biden's camp will simply just write, this is our platform. And who knows what Joe Biden stands for? That's what we've talked a lot about. We know he is aggressively standing against people that challenge him at events. Yes. If it's on immigration, if it's on workers' rights, it's on guns. But what does Joe Biden stand for? I don't hear anything beyond whatever it was Barack Obama stood for, and that turned off a lot of people, as you remember. I mean, the Barack Obama people forget, as important as it is that we have a black president in the United States, and symbolically, that was a huge threshold for a lot of us to cross, and for people to see somebody that wasn't a white man become president, that will have a lasting impact forever. But when he got elected, that really hurt the party down ballot. They lost 1,000 seats,
1,100
state, national, local races. That party just imploded in so many ways because I don't know if it was a trade-off for Barack Obama. When Barack Obama didn't start actually addressing the material conditions of people, offered hope and change, and then you don't change anything.
Yeah.
And people are saying, well, what the heck? And that's like the other story from yesterday is a lot of people were upset, or not upset, but this idea that young people didn't turn out or that certain subsets of people didn't turn out. And we have that same thing all the time here in Washington, D.C. There's maybe 17% of people, even less, voted in Southeast Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Well, you've been oppressed. You live in poverty. You don't have health care. You don't have shelter. Your schools are being privatized and sold to developers all around the country, to the Betsy DeVosses of the world. And why are you going to turn out and vote? What are you saying? Who's telling you, oh, spend a few hours for it? We haven't done anything for you the last 4 years. You don't see us unless it's election time or it's Thanksgiving. We
But
hand
we
out a
want you to come out
turkey.
and vote for us.
But come on and vote for it. And then people say, well, sorry, Sanders didn't win. It shows he couldn't turn out the young people. It's like, why are young people turning out to engage in your Democratic Party primaries? This isn't Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden. This is the Democratic Party held a contest between two people that said they were Democrats, and a whole heck of a lot of people didn't show up.
Yes.
That's not a Bernie Sanders to show. That's the Democratic Party does not have those people engaged. And a lot of people are not. If you're listening to our show, you're engaged to a degree that vast majority of people are not engaged to.
Right.
They simply say, what's my wallet at the end of the day? They say there's not more money. I don't feel more comforted. I don't know where my kids are going to go to school. I don't know where I'm going to get health care if I lose my job or if I'm in between jobs or I'm like transitioning into a new job. People are panicked right now. They're not saying, oh, I'm panicked, but let me take my 3-4 hours. And you see these lines, and we'll talk more about this in our show. You see these long lines in Michigan, North Dakota. Who is seeing that on television saying, I've gotten nothing from this process, but yet I'll give 4 hours of my afternoon when I'm supposed to be. Get out of here. That's crazy.
Keep doing that. They do that every year, though. I mean, and look, just so we're clear, and I'm glad we're hitting on this very specific point. That Biden currently has 846 delegates to Sanders 684. That's not.
It's like a tie, basically.
Yeah, that's not, entirely the contest is over with. I know people want to push this narrative that this is over, this is over. I don't see it that way. I see a septuagenarian that is going to get on the debate stage that has an inability to talk and to communicate and is going to be debating somebody that is hungry, thirsty, and has been powerful on that debate stage. And he is going to have to not have anybody to hide from. He's going to be there defending his point.
It's interesting, just real quick, I want to say, it was interesting talking to you yesterday and to see a lot of Bernie. It was like you all knew that you were going to get punched in the face.
Yes.
And you were like, I don't want to get punched in the face. This is going to hurt really bad. And you all got punched in the face really hard yesterday. But today you feel like much better. You're like, good. I just knew I had to get hit in the face. I didn't want that to happen. We had to get hit in the face. Now that that's over, let's reassess ourselves and
because honestly, because it could be worse. I mean, it could have been Sanders could have lost everything last night. I mean, honestly, in real terms, he took. Look, it's like anything else. Like there have been chess games or tournaments where I've been in a tournament and sometimes you've been playing this kind of lackadaisical way and somewhere along the way it just snap on all at once and you're like, oh, wait, I might lose this thing. Yeah. Like it's that second wind of sorts. And so, you don't necessarily always get everything you want in the contest, but there's some points where you do need to reorient the ship and then you try to maximize your opportunities. That's where I consider we are. We're trying to maximize our opportunities. Now, here's the catch. Last night, even though there was a bit of celebrating, there were a few people in media who started to realize, wait a minute, Bernie Sanders is getting all of these youth. I mean, he's getting like 80% of the youth vote. Joe Biden is not getting any of these youth vote. And if we're saying they're not showing up now, what is it going to look like come 2020 when we expect these youth, the people who we call Nazis and who we call were Putin puppets and we call Bernie bros, and we pretended as if they weren't people of color and all of the basically people who cared and were concerned about their material conditions. We outright viciously attacked those people and pretended we didn't want them part of the process. Hey, maybe we're going to have trouble getting those people in. Let's hear Van Jones give a warning to the Democratic Party.
This is a very dangerous moment for the Democratic Party. You have now an insurgency that's about to be defeated. What do you do with the people that you defeat? There was a hope on the part of a lot of young people they had a champion. You got young people who are graduating with $250,000 in debt. You got young people with a lot of pain, and they had a champion. Mm-hmm. And that they thought that they were going to be able to surround a divided establishment with their movement, crush that divided establishment, and move forward. Instead, the establishment united and stopped them. Now what do you do? Last time Bernie Sanders got beaten, there was an assumption that all those people were just going to fall in line and vote against Trump. And there was not enough care for the concern and the pain of his base. I think tonight there's going to be a lot of crowing, a lot of relief on the part of the establishment, but keep it temperate and turn to those people and say, we want to be your champion. Yeah. If you don't do that, you're going to have a Pyrrhic victory.
Yeah, I don't see that happening at all. I've called the left the politically equivalent of a battered wife. They beat you, they lie to you, they have sex with the maid, they fix dinner without washing their hands. And for God's sake, they cheated you in 2016 and you still turned around and voted for Clinton. In fact, more lefties voted for Clinton than Clinton supporters voted for Obama after that election. Put that in context. They cheated you and you still voted for the party that cheated you. Why should a party respect your interests if you're not willing to have a spine regarding about the way you take care of your interests? Explain to me. What reason is there to care about and respect the perspective of the left if you're willing to vote blue no matter who, regardless of what happens during the primary process? And again, this is a party that keeps moving further and further to the right. And you still go with this notion that you have nowhere else to go when you're stuck voting for this particular party. There's all this talk about the black vote being taken for granted, the Hispanic vote being taken for granted. Of course it's being taken for granted. Why wouldn't it be? If you vote 90% of the time for any random Democrat, then yes, it would be strange if they didn't take your vote for granted because they believe that you are stuck with them. This notion of identity, this is in part why the left is so distrustful of this notion of identity. The Democratic Party has used identity as a token for 50 years or more, as opposed to dealing with the economic realities of people's budget. They focused on this notion of class. I'm sorry, on this notion of race or gender or sexuality, as opposed to dealing with the material, real conditions. For the last 50 years, the Democratic Party has turned to the left and said, yes, we're going to deregulate Wall Street. Yes, we're going to back NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Yes, we're going to destroy welfare. Yes, we're going to destroy the prison population. Yes, we're going to give 95% of the income to the top 1%. We're going to do all these things. And you're going to vote for us anyway because you have nowhere else to go. And that has been the argument going all the way back to Bill Clinton. Yes, I'm going to do all of these horrible right-wing things, but you're going to vote for me anyway because you have nowhere else to go. Until the left really deals with that very specific point, nothing changes. Until you grow a spine, until you're willing to walk, until you're willing to go away. When they say you have nowhere else to go, to say, hey, I have my policy things that I agree with and that I am backing. And if those things aren't being backed, or if you don't agree with those things, I am going to walk. Short of that, you are not going to get anything. They've called you Nazis. They've called you Russian plants. They've called you Russian bots. They've said that you were violent and aggressive. And even in the situation of this context of this election, even when it looked like Sanders was going to get the plurality of the vote, they still wouldn't turn around and back you. They were willing to take it to the convention. You are not going to get respect from the standpoint of the left until you're willing to look at them when they say you have nowhere else to go and say, yeah, I do have somewhere else to go. Not with you. Meaning I will back the person who represents my interests. I will back the person who has these particular litmus tests of items that I am in a philosophical agreement with. And short of that, to be willing to walk. And don't take my word for it. Let's say Lawrence O'Donnell. Lawrence O'Donnell is making a very similar argument that I was making back in 2016.
If you want to pull the party, the major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking, you must show them that you're capable of not voting for them.
Yeah, that's true. Otherwise, why would they care? Think about what we're saying for the moment. Hillary Clinton gets in 2016. She cheats you. They screw you over. They cheat your guy. She gets in, and then she passes the Trans-Pacific Partnership after saying she wasn't. Let's say she, I don't know, attacks Syria. Let's say she does some of these other horrible things. Let's say she privatizes Social Security. Comes back up in 2020. Hillary Clinton is running against Ted Cruz. Do you turn around and vote for Clinton after she did all of these things that she said she wasn't going to do and that you as the left completely and entirely hate? And if you would turn around and vote blue no matter who, why would they care at all about anything that you want as a Democrat? Unless you're willing to grow a spine and walk through that door of you have nowhere else to go, nothing that you want from the standpoint of political concessions would ever take place. So, yes, I bet you guys need to heed what Van Jones is saying, and maybe you need to pay attention to the hubris that Hillary Clinton ran with this race and ask yourself whether or not Biden is going to be the person that gets the energy and gets the momentum for people to come out and actually vote for him as opposed to Trump. What do you think, Bob? Look, personally, I don't think Biden is electable, but I don't think they cared. I thought it was one of those situations where they looked at it and said, it is better to stop Sanders now as opposed to having him take the party over for a generation, as opposed to winning or opposed beating Trump. Meaning beating Trump was a greater, was a lesser priority as opposed to stopping Sanders, even if that meant just propping up Joe Biden for the win?
Yeah, it's hard to know, and I think I've said a different answer every day we've talked
Yeah.
about this of like what is happening. I don't think the Democratic Party here in Washington, D.C., the one I'm familiar with, and I think it's similar to Chicago, L.A., Baltimore, San Francisco, and other major urban area, Philadelphia, other cities like that. These Democrats are in positions of power that care about the developers and corporations in their communities.
Yeah.
And they think through economic growth, there will be safer streets, there'll be more education opportunities, and more people happy, and they'll get reelected. These people, for me, don't care about the issues that Bernie Sanders cares about. They're not pushing for Medicare for all. Here in the city, we were given millions of dollars from federal government money for Narcan, which is a way to basically stop an opioid overdose or heroin overdose. They basically spray into people's nose. And we got millions of dollars to distribute these little bottles that are quite easy to give to people across the city. And after a year or two, they did an audit, and they showed that the government had not spent millions of those dollars. They didn't set up the health systems to actually distribute these life-saving medical devices to all these different people across the community because that wasn't their interest. They're spending time with developers. They're spending time trying to attract Amazon to come to Washington, D.C. The D.C. Democratic Party is more focused on police than it is on people that are accosted or abused by police. They sell police to people that they're trying to attract here to say, look, if you move into these neighborhoods, you have all sorts of police. Mm-hmm. Bernie Sanders is talking about something that's fundamentally different than what the Democratic Party is talking about. So to say, well, they don't want Sanders because they don't want those issues. They don't want Sanders because they don't think they can win. I don't think it's that. I think it's much less, can they beat Trump? Yeah. I don't think beating Trump is necessarily the forefront of their minds right now. You wouldn't put a Biden, I think, at this point. I think it is issue-based that Joe Biden is the guy that we all know that will keep us all in our positions. He won't challenge our ideologies. He won't challenge our relationship with developers. They won't challenge big money in politics. They won't challenge the billionaires we know. Because those billionaires are on the phone. Told a story about Sunil Puri, a multi-hundred millions of dollars guy in Rockford, Illinois, my hometown, who runs the Democratic Party there. He's the only person in northern Illinois outside of Chicago that gives money to the Democrats. Illinois is 102 counties. I think it's 100 counties are Republican, and then you have Cook County that goes towards Democrats, and that's enough to basically win it for Democrats every year. Yeah. And so the Democratic Party needs his money in northern Illinois. Otherwise, they'll have zero ground game. They'll have zero representation, and they're completely at the whatever he wants. And I think that's what people are comfortable with. They know he has the money. They know he can fund it. You're telling me I have to go out and find 10,000 small dollar donations to actually have a revolution that Bernie Sanders is talking about, or I can just rely on the one rich guy? Let's stay with the one rich guy. I want to chill on my. But Jamar, we're going to take a quick break. I did want to give you a little pep talk to you and other people out there that may be feeling like their heads are down. They're not sure where America's going. I have a special clip here to play for you to rally and to energize people today, Wednesday. Here that clip is.
We have to unite the country because, folks, it's time we stop walking around with our heads down. We are better positioned than any country in the world to own the 21st century. So for God's sake, get up. Get up and remember, this is the United States of America. There's nothing we've been unable to do when we decide we're going to do it. Nothing at all.
Nothing. If you decide you want Bernie Sanders, then get up, folks. Get up there. Nothing will stop you. That was Joe Biden. You're listening to Political Misfits live in Washington, D.C. We're back after this.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
Tune in every Wednesday to Loud and Clear with Brian Becker and John Kiriakou for a regular segment called Beyond Nuclear, where Brian and John discuss nuclear issues, including weapons, energy, waste, and the future of nuclear technology in the United States, with Kevin Camps, the radioactive waste watchdog at the organization Beyond Nuclear. Listen on Wednesdays right here on Radio Sputnik.
Welcome back to Political Misfits, the show that goes against the grain. My name is Jamal Thomas. I'm here with my co-host Bob Schlehuber. And we're jumping into the results of Mini Super Tuesday. So there were 6 states up for grabs last night: Idaho, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, and Washington State. Joe Biden had a dominant but expected showing in Mississippi and Missouri. Both states, for the most part, were called immediately. Idaho was a bit of a closer result, but it went to Biden. Sanders hoped to pull off an upset in Michigan, but again, he loses Michigan in double digits. By the same token, he did win North Dakota, and there is currently, at the very least, last I checked, a very slim lead in Washington State. I think it was like by 0.2. So we're joined by Christine Hendricks, president of the University of City School Board, Junior Bayard Rustin Fellow with the Fellowship for Reconciliation and contributor to the Truth Telling Project and the We Stay Woke podcast.
She's busy. That's what it all says there.
Yeah, that's what that means. How's it going, Christine?
Yes, it's great. And you forgot co-chair of the Cori Bush for Congress campaign.
Yes.
Co-chair of the...
Tell us a little bit more.
Right.
That is an exciting note that we wanted you to talk on, and we were going to give you extended voice there. Cori Bush is running there in Missouri. Tell us a little bit more what you thought about the results across the board there in those 6 states. Tell us a little bit more about Missouri, where you are, and then a little bit about Cori Bush, who wasn't on the ballot yesterday. That won't be until August, but somebody who I think really speaks to the moment, this kind of Joe Biden versus Bernie Sanders, of what it means to be a Democrat, what the Democratic Party stands for, all of those things. I think Cori Bush is kind of the epitome of what people are looking for the Democratic Party to evolve out of, which they show clearly they're not quite ready to do yesterday.
Well, yeah, so I was definitely disappointed. Bernie Sanders came Monday. We had a very exciting rally. There were lots of young people there. It was a packed house at the Seifel Theater. There was a lot of energy in the room. Cori spoke. And, we had a lot of the local elected officials who spoke and who were just really excited about Bernie. And unfortunately, in Missouri, I wouldn't say it was a surprise, definitely still a disappointment. We had a lot of people around the state of Missouri, even in the corners that are very, very Republican, that were working super duper hard. As far as Michigan goes, again, another disappointment. I thought that at least the margins would have been closer, given that Bernie actually won against Hillary. Still holding out hope for Washington State. I think that's super important. Still holding out hope for Illinois. It just seems that, with the mainstream media continually calling it this Biden momentum, having had everybody drop out right before Super Tuesday and then endorse Biden, it really seems like the status quo element of the Democratic Party is doing a great job coalescing. And once that starts happening, people just seem to hop onto the bandwagon. So it's really that clip that you played earlier about, we still have time. There's still almost half the delegates out, or half the delegates out there. So we need to really start talking to people and letting them know that Bernie is not radical, that he's just espousing true democratic values, and that we should be looking for the heart and soul of the party to go more towards labor and working folks than to the 1% millionaires. And Joe Biden is only going to continue the status quo. His whole message is about restoring dignity to the White House. It's not about restoring health care to communities. It's not about building up communities, just restoring dignity to the White House. So I think we really have to dig in on that message and let people know that Joe Biden doesn't have a plan for the future. Really, the only person left in this race that does is Bernie Sanders. Yeah,
it was quite interesting looking at a lot of the exit polls from different places there when it came to the question, how do you feel about replacing all private health insurance with a single government plan for everyone? And there in Missouri, 58% of people supported that. 37% of people did not support that. In the state of Washington, 63% support, opposed 30%. Mississippi, 60% support, 35% opposed. Same in Missouri, Michigan. All the numbers are the same. A good 20 to 30% more people that voted in the Democratic primary want there to be a single-payer healthcare option run by the government to replace private health insurance. But as you say there, Christine, seemingly that issue, which seems to be a huge issue on most voters' minds, is not what people are voting on. Is it just simply they're voting on, can we beat Trump? But at the same time, do people really think it's about Biden beating Trump, or is it about entrenched power, the Lacey Clays, who's rounding about 20 years there in the House of Representatives, the representative there representing the St. Louis and beyond congressional district? Is it just about power keeping power? And they've been, I just still don't quite get it, Jamar. That's what I guess I'm looking for answers. What are people voting for yesterday, if it's not issues and it's not honestly who's going to beat Donald Trump, what is it?
I think people were voting for who they believe will beat Donald Trump based on how the media is portraying it, and also power keeps power. So I don't think that it's like one thing versus another. I think it's several things. When I'm listening to people and talking to people, outside of polls about what they want, and they're like, oh yeah, Joe Biden, he can beat Trump. Yeah, Joe Biden, he was next to Obama and he got some Obama on him. Like. I mean, it's really like that, and so people, and I think it really started in North Carolina and just kind of snowballed Mississippi, especially black voters. I'm hearing that, black voters don't believe that, Bernie Sanders is going to make good on his promise because, we still have to deal with Mitch McConnell in, Kentucky, and it's like, well, he has a challenger that can actually beat him. And if we started espousing actual democratic values, actual progressive values, like you just showed, we would get more support. And if we talked about them in a way that didn't make it seem like it was socialist or that socialism was bad or that we don't already have a system that has an element of socialism in it, I think that people can understand that, and vote for their pocketbook, actually, instead of voting out of fear.
This is a deadening of expectations, basically. I mean, because ultimately, I think when people listen to Sanders, I think they think he's a true believer. Meaning, when you look at who do you think is more authentic, who do you think is more honest, who you better on these issues, Sanders gets it. Even if you ask them, who do you believe that we should have single-payer health care? In all of these states that are voted, including the ones that Sanders got beat in the most, they still came out with a majority of people saying, yes. Is this not just a failure of potential or a failure of believing in big things or that these things are possible? And isn't that failure of imagination basically the result of the Democratic Party and its policies for the past 50 years?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, that power keeps power, and their ability to fundraise and make money from Wall Street and corporate America versus from everyday folks. And I personally think that even though they are fighting really hard, I still see momentum in the movement that Bernie has, and I still see a resolve of people to continue fighting the status quo Democratic Party, even as they are kind of resigning themselves to we might have to support Joe Biden.
Yeah, and speaking of the Democratic Party and where their focuses are, Christine, I was at an event a few weeks ago. I had the opportunity to cover an event organized by Delonte Wilkins, who is a 29-year-old D.C. native who organizes what's called Link Up, and they work with tenants that live in public housing. They work with longtime residents. They work with seniors. They work with young people. And they had a gathering at a church, a good old church basement gathering. And they were talking about displacement due to gentrification, police brutality, prisons rights, mass incarceration. And I had a chance to talk to Delonte after the event, and I wanted to ask him, what role does the Democratic Party have in his event that day, in an event that was organized by the grassroots, by the longtime residents, by voters? These people are voters that turn out every 2 years or however frequently there are elections coming up. These people turn out, they're voters, they're longtime residents. They're at the crunch of what's been happening in this city and across the country when it's come to displacing people out of their communities. Here is what I asked, and then his follow-up around the Democratic Party. Curious what the role of the Democratic Party was in this grassroots event today.
None at all. Actually, like, I mean, it seemed like a segregated question because I don't recall the Democrats ever participated too much in the community efforts that we got. In fact, they usually opposing our efforts. And it's funny because this is a Democratic city, very liberal, and I guess how I understand liberal in D.C. is very centrist, right? And I guess they say we are left, but they don't participate in our left. So.
Yeah, and that, Christine, conversation was yesterday about how dare these young people like the Delonte Wilkins not turn out to vote in the Democratic primary, or how Bernie Sanders couldn't turn them out. But it's a Democratic Party that has a real problem, and they're looking right past the Delonte Wilkins of the world, and that's how you're going to win an election. And if you're going to win, what are you trying to even win? You think you'd be trying to win like who are the people of Delonte who are at the front lines of these issues?
I mean, you would think, but I mean, just, St. Louis is a so-called Democratic city, and we have a so-called Democratic mayor. And, the progressives are constantly, fighting her on issues of, homelessness and issues of police brutality, trying to get the workhouse closed. So, I mean, most of our Democrats are not true Democrats. They're Democrats in name only. They make a lot of promises towards social reform, but in actuality, they're deep in the pockets of banks, big business. Our own representative, Lacey Clay, we have serious issues around poverty in St. Louis. He takes lots of money from payday lending companies. So who do you think he cares more about, payday lending companies or the people who go into debt? Because he's allowed for them to charge these, these outrageous interest rates because he voted against, these bills. So I think when young folks see, Democrats continuously voting against their interests, continuously voting for things or allowing things to come through as votes that don't speak to the issues that they have, that aren't speaking to the fact that we have a climate crisis. I think that sometimes they tend to just back away because they're like, my vote doesn't count. What I have to say, no one is paying attention to. And I see a lot of progressives saying, well, why are you asking Bernie voters to come and make sure Biden gets into office when you all are not paying attention to us now?
Right there. And I think that's the honest truth of it. That basically it is the Democratic Party. I understand the Dino, the Democratic name only, but at this point, that's the party. I mean, when you're looking at who that party represents, it is not those people. I mean, let's put it in real terms. Bernie Sanders said healthcare is a human right. He said, let's expand Social Security. Let's pay down school debt, school loans, et cetera. Let's do that. That's our policy prescription. That's what we want to accomplish. That's what we believe in. That's what I, as a head of the Democratic Party, will represent. And you had the entirety of the party apparatus turn against him and fight on that very specific front. I would argue that, to some degree, what you support, but also what you oppose is indicative of what you are. And if that's the main of the party, and that's the Democratic Party that does that, I don't think we can call it Dinos. I think we can just call them, those are just Democrats. And honestly, why should the youth vote back Joe Biden or back the Democratic Party if that party is not willing to back the items that they care about?
202-521-1320, 202-521-1320 if you want to give us a call. We do have Ben on the line. Ben, thanks for hanging on there. You're on with the Political Misfits.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for calling in.
It seems sort of like, much to Bob's point, that like within like the two parties, it seems like the Republicans are really good at weaponizing like anger, whereas Democrats are really good at like using fear to their advantage, which causes the electorate to behave a lot differently. But in regards to the youth vote, I was looking at some of the numbers and whatnot, and it seems not so much that like a lot of the youth didn't turn out. In some cases, it seems like it's more so than 2016. If anything, it seems like the older, boomer generation came out in droves. Biden that previously wasn't there in 2016, which makes me think, when they blame younger people for Hillary's loss, I'm like, well, where are all those, older people then? They didn't vote for her.
Yeah, no, great points. I think if you look at Michigan, and that's where a lot of people, thanks, Ben, for the call, Michigan, people were blaming Jill Stein, the Russians, anything and everything. It was bizarre. And you see that in the largest 4 counties around Detroit, there was 130,000 vote drop-off from Barack Obama to Hillary Clinton. And Trump won that state by 11,000 votes. And so you're saying, like, you had 130,000 of your party people that voted for Barack Obama. They didn't turn out. You needed 10%, just over 10% of that, and Hillary Clinton would have won Michigan. And you look to anybody and everybody to blame, but you don't simply say, no, we didn't turn out our people. That was the problem. Christine, I'm curious there in Missouri, if I have my numbers right, kind of a strange vote total this time around compared to 2008. In 2008, huge turnout there in the Democratic primary. I had 825,000 people turn out, but here yesterday, about 664,000, so a good 160,000 person drop off. It is up 40,000 votes from 2016, so there was more of a turnout, but not that same energy when Barack Obama was on the ticket. And this is what I'm telling people with the young people, and I'm going back to that first debate with Joe Biden in Miami. If you think young people or people are going to go out and volunteer for Joe Biden in snow, in the rain, in the hottest of the hot days in Iowa. You got to be kidding me.
Ain't gonna happen.
People may turn out to support him in the primary and stop Bernie Sanders, but if you think he's going to turn out people in droves to beat Donald Trump, you better hope it's all online advertisement and media, because if it's door to door, you're going to have a tough time.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. And I see people who have been in the Bernie camp, people who I've been, volunteering and organizing with, and they have said that they're not going to help Joe Biden. Even if they may vote for him, they're definitely not going to have the same energy, the same mass appeal, the same level of engagement that people have with a candidate like Bernie Sanders. And I also think that it's, in some respects, a candidate like Joe Biden does nothing for someone like a Cori Bush or the gentleman that's running in Chicago. His name escapes me right now. So if we have, people like Bernie on the ballot and people like Bernie endorsing these, newer, younger, energetic candidates, then we're definitely going to have more young people turned out. I've had more young people in the past couple of days ask how they could get involved with Cori Bush's campaign, because they're looking for that type of candidate that is going to push them forward and make them want to become engaged with the Democratic Party. Otherwise, they don't see too much light between Biden and Trump to get excited about that candidate.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought that Biden was the weakest candidate that could go up against somebody like Donald
Well, he
Trump.
shouldn't be challenging so many people to push-up competitions if he's so weak that tomorrow.
You would think. I mean, look, the issue with Biden is that all of the weaknesses that Donald Trump would have, Joe Biden just so happens to also have. Why do you think that people consider him more electable, Christine? I mean, is this really just an issue of these are the people that are around them in their sandbox? These are the people in their bubble, and because everybody in a bubble thinks that he's more electable, they just run with this idea. What are they using to go with this notion that Joe Biden is the guy to beat Trump?
I think it just happens to be that he, is an older statesman. He's been around for a while. He, again, has the Barack Obama juice all over him. He's a status quo Democrat. He's a corporatocrat. So I think that people really just, and the media, I've been trying to avoid the media so I don't go crazy, but when I'm looking at the mainstream media, I'm seeing, the buzzwords that they're using, that propaganda that they're using to reinforce, the narrative that, Joe is doing so much better. I remember even when Bernie was, winning those states, they were talking about, the momentum that Joe Biden has or how Joe Biden is, moving forward. And I think that people really have that stuck in their mind, that centrism or that moderation will win and will get Republicans to come over and vote for Joe Biden. I think that's the logic that people are using.
What do you think Sanders could have done differently in this race, if anything? I mean, if based on your own analysis of this race up to this point, what do you think he could have done differently that would have given him more bang for his buck?
Maybe built a coalition amongst some more local elected leaders. I think he did a decent job here in St. Louis. I think maybe having more, especially in those areas that may turn out for him, like Southern Missouri. And I think, maybe even having that conversation with Elizabeth Warren and maybe even Castro and some of the other ones, Marianne Williamson, some of the people that dropped out, sooner, and seeing if he could get them into the progressive fold, because I think a lot of people saw, these elected officials turning towards Biden and just saw it as being inevitable.
But he shouldn't have to. I mean, look, if Warren is really, if she ran the race like she said she was, meaning if people believe her that she's being legit, that she really did, care, believe the Green New Deal, or that climate was an existential issue, that people losing because of their health care, meaning that she believed in Medicare for all, why should he have to hunt her down in order to push him to back her? I mean, to endorse him under those situations? Wouldn't that just be somewhat of a natural endorsement? And don't you believe that if roles were reversed, meaning this was Warren, that Sanders would have just immediately backed her?
Well, I definitely believe that Sanders would have immediately backed Warren. That's why he ended as my number one, because of the person that he is. However, I think that, politics being the way that it is, I don't even think it was so much for Elizabeth Warren as it was for a lot of her supporters. A lot of her supporters were very angry with Bernie and very angry with Bernie's supporters for a myriad of reasons. And I think that would have been, that olive branch would have been more for her supporters, not necessarily just because of Elizabeth Warren, because there's a lot of animosity in that. I mean, I saw like a lot of Warren people saying that they were never Bernie because of that perceived injustice that happened at one of the debates. And so that really is like stuck in a lot of Warren people's minds.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't know.
Sensitive talking points here for Jamarl with the Elizabeth Warren world
she's
and the endorsement of things.
Yeah, I've been look, I've been somewhat cynical regarding Warren. My thought was that she was a creature of the party in 2016, and she was going to be a creature of the party in 2020. So
and that's where her not going after saying this party is corrupt. She's basically saying, "Oh, the party needs." It's kind of like the light reform. It's like big structural change, but with a party that we trust and love, and everybody should come gather around. And I think I really want to ask you, Christine, as somebody with a frontline perspective on the movement for Black Lives, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Ferguson uprisings arcing from 2014 now to 2020, and electoral politics for me has always been the place where social movement dies. And I'm kind of curious here with the movement for Black Lives, and then you also kind of have the resistance movement, and they're definitely separate things, but you see this kind of the resistance movement, the Women's March the day after Donald Trump is inaugurated, for the first year after Trump is in office, every single day, blocks from our studio here at the White House, there was a different issue group that was out there protesting. The concerning thing for me was always like, you groups all need to collaborate together. Like, you all have your own thing, which is exciting, and people are super engaged, but you're re-siloing yourself. And I think many people at the end of the Obama administration started to kind of reconnect in new ways. But I'm really kind of curious, what is the state of the Black Lives Matter movement? And I'll say movement for Black Lives because it's a little bit broader and encapsulates a lot more groups that are working. Obviously, you and yours are putting your energy behind Cori Bush running for office. But it seemed like a lot of other people weren't even willing to engage in electoral politics. They've been down this road enough. They hear the same old kind of stump speeches from these politicians, and there's just a lack of engagement. And so I'm curious, do we see a new social movement rise out of this if Sanders does not win the nomination? Do you see a new social movement arise? Do we see an economic movement of sorts? Because politics in America it's not facilitating the movement of the masses right now.
Well, definitely. So I think a couple things need to happen. I think that there's not a lot of energy around the movement for Black Lives. I think that there are people and organizations who are doing things, who are always going to be doing things. But I think around the time of the election, that kind of, it's been losing steam. And I think that ADOS tried to, which is, African descendants of slavery or whatever they're going by. So when ADOS tried to move into that political realm of advocating for Black people in America, and it's just my opinion that I feel like they missed the mark in so many ways in trying to merge the movement for Black Lives into something political. And I think that, that we as Black people need to figure out what our agenda is and present it to our politicians. So, for instance, here in St. Louis, one of the things that people are working on is Close the Workhouse. That's an agenda for our community that we're taking to the politicians that they can either get on board with or get ran over with, because that's where we're at, right? And so I think that, we have to understand that as Black people, we're not always going to get politicians that are going to speak exactly to our issues, but we need to get politicians that are going to speak to the issues that will give Black people the space and the economic ability to be a part of revolution, because being a part of that, it can be a sacrifice. And when you're economically disadvantaged, you don't see that as necessarily an option when you're just fighting the struggle for basic health care and to make sure that your children have a proper education. So if we can lessen some of the oppression that Black folks are facing, then we could have more energy to put towards a true Black agenda that encapsulates us all.
How do you use leverage in order to get those political concessions?
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely do. But I think that, some people saw Bernie Sanders as not having a black agenda, and so therefore not wanting to coalesce around him, instead of seeing Bernie Sanders as having an agenda that would positively affect black folks. And then we could go back, because he has some amazing women, black women around him who would advocate for these things and who he would listen to. We're not using our leverage correctly either.
That was Christine Hendricks, president of the University City School Board, Junior Bayard Rustin Fellow with the Fellowship for Reconciliation, contributor to the Truth Telling Project and We Stay Woke podcast. You can see her work and the other work of some great movement organizers, activists, educators at CoryBush.org, who is taking on Lacey Clay for Congress. Christine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll take a break here on Political Misfits. We're live in Washington, D.C. on Radio Sputnik. We're back after this.
We call Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan the most disruptive radio show in America.
It's a great show, and we have a lot of fun.
We come to you live from Washington, D.C. every Monday through Friday morning.
What I like best is that we bring in experts from all over the world. From Barcelona, from Egypt, from Seoul, South Korea.
From Newark, New Jersey. We try to bring people great guests, great calls from our listeners, and, of course, stupid jokes. And we do it with two hosts that have very different viewpoints. Now, here's the thing, Garland. A lot of people would think you and I would just argue. I mean, I'm a Republican Trump supporter.
And, of course, I am a progressive Democrat Bernie Sanders supporter.
The surprising thing is how much we actually agree on.
And you won't be surprised, because you're going to find out just how much you agree and just how much you enjoy this show.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. My name is Jamal Thomas. I'm here with my co-host, Bob Schlehuber. We've been discussing the results of Mini Super Tuesday. Give us a call at 202-521-1320. That's 202-521-1320 if you have anything to say on this topic or whatever else is on your mind. So, Bob, a person who, one of your favorites, the Asian man that wants to give people $1,000, Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang had not put out his endorsement. Well, that has changed. Andrew Yang is now grifting on CNN, given his endorsement. Let's hear the clip.
I believe that Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee, and I've always said I'm going to support whoever the nominee is, so I hereby am endorsing Joe Biden to be not just the nominee for the Democratic Party, but the next president of the United States. And I say this, having supported Bernie Sanders in 2016, Bernie was an inspiration for me, inspired my run, but the math says Joe is our prohibitive nominee. We need to bring the party together. We need to start working on defeating Donald Trump in the fall. I've had many personal conversations with Joe about the impact of the fourth industrial revolution on the middle class. I believe that he's the right man for the job to help us not just defeat Donald Trump, but govern the country in the years ahead.
Hear, hear, I now proclaim on the day of this day that I support Joe Biden. It's not
prohibitive. He says prohibitive.
I hereby
Does he not know what math is? I mean, look, Joe Biden doesn't even have half of the qualifying delegates at this point. And I would imagine there will be a lot of people in the Yang gang that will be greatly disappointed in this thing. And because I'm basing it just based on the number of people on the age ranges of the people who are backing Yang. And these people tended to be more along the lines of anti-establishment type of politicians. And so the other person for that might have been a Sanders type. Joe Biden type doesn't necessarily factor into me in regards to his particular demographic. Now, I could be wrong on that. I mean, look, when Yang came out for Medicare for All, Yang was literally in the video saying, I'm not for Medicare for All, even though I'm saying I'm for Medicare for All. And people still called into the show, hey, why do you think Yang's not for Medicare for All? Because he said he wasn't for Medicare for All. I know, man, but you haven't seen his health care plan yet. Maybe he's going to have an awesome health care plan. No, he wasn't for the Medicare for All then. He was not for it now. The Yang just lied. So, yes, there'll be a certain degree of self-delusion in people.
I mean, the UBI, if you're a fan of it, just go on his website and read about how it doesn't stack on top of other welfare social net
Yes.
programs, basically. And so basically, if you needed that $1,000, it came at the expense of other programs you may have been getting. So to think $1,000 a month is going to provide a floor for the 40 million Americans living in poverty, sure, it helps. It's a nice talking point. It's going to help a lot of people, but ultimately, it's not going to actually solve the problems with this economy, which is need for mass redistribution of wealth. We have quite a few callers on the line here. We have Tarek, and then we'll go to Anthony and Bryant, but we'll first start with Tarek here on the Progressive Comeback. Tarek, thanks for calling in. Tarek, you're quite hard to hear. You're there. Tarek, I'm going to put you on hold real quick. I'll come back to you in a second if you can figure out your sound issues while we'll take the call from Anthony. Anthony, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. Love what you guys are doing. Just as a quick aside on the Andrew Yang thing, I don't know why everybody's surprised by his lack of math skills. I think Hassan Minhaj really kind of ousted him on his show when he couldn't answer that 7th grade math problem on air. But I wanted to talk about the election fraud. I'm sure you guys have heard about all the voting machines going down and being moved, the polling stations being moved, and Bernie just came out saying these long lines are egregious. But something that's not being talked about as much that I came across a few days ago by some election integrity activists is the exit poll discrepancies. I don't know if you guys have seen much about this, but there is a website going around by an independent researcher. It's called tdmsresearch.com. That's T as in tiger, D as in dog, M as in Mary, S as in Sam, research.com. And just the gigantic exit poll discrepancies. I wanted to know you guys' thoughts on that. Thanks a lot.
So, look, elections are dramatically important, to put it mildly. And it is our way of determining who is going to take power without there being like a war or conflict. It should be it's vitally necessary that this process is transparent and this process is fair. And look, the exit polling is not flat fact, word of God type stuff. And I would have to look further into it. So there's that. But I do think there's something to be said that the elections should be legit, and it should be clearly legit. Not like I think it's this way, or not like we believe it's this way. But no, it should be a clear, transparent process that everybody can come to the process with a clear belief and knowing that the process has been fair. And whether that's with, Bloomberg's setting $500 million on fire, whether that's networks just putting on lies in order to kind of entice people to a certain point of view, whether that's the media giving free publicity for certain campaigns, all of those things have influences in our campaigns, especially in moving the campaign sites or making the lines obnoxiously long. Operation Crosscheck, where they were getting rid of various people in the race based on their last names. I mean, we have all sorts of processes in our country that go through excluding and cutting down on the number of people to vote because it benefits certain sections of our political class.
And hang on, Anthony, after the hour here, thank you for your call. We'll be talking to people at the front lines of voter suppression efforts in Georgia, the lawsuits that have been going on there. Let's try Tariq again. Tariq, thank you for hanging on there.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm a progressive, but I don't see progressives having any type of future, any of us, if we don't make sure or we don't ensure a Biden loss. I think progressives still have a chance either two ways. Bernie he uses his leverage. We use the youth vote because we can't just give the Democrats our vote. We need to let them know. The only reason moderates get more say is because people know moderates may choose a Republican. We need to be able to say, hey, we might withhold our vote and allow a Biden to lose to fight for an AOC or progressive in 2024. Or we use our leverage to get the VP spot and take out Biden from the inside. The guy has dementia. I mean, I think that's what we need to do.
I agree.
We'll just say signs of dementia just for the non-medical experts of us out there. But, yeah, good luck trying to do anything with that party, man. I hear what you're saying. I hear on the strategy. But if you withhold your vote, they'll simply blame you for reelecting Trump. They won't say, oh, we should have gone to those people to help us have beaten Donald Trump. You'll get blamed for it. And yeah, I mean,
but they got to be okay with that. That's the catch.
Yeah.
You have to be okay with them blaming you for Trump. Look, they can blame anybody they want. They can point to anybody they want. At the end of the day, it boils down to the candidate to get those votes.
Yeah.
And if your candidate and your party has moved so far to the right that you're not appealing to these aspects of the electorate, that's on you. That's on you. They can blame whoever they want.
Brian, thanks for hanging on there, calling into Political Misfits, 202-521-1320. Brian, what did you think about the results there last night?
Oh, man, it's disheartening as hell. I'm really sad. It's like anybody else. You know what I mean? I still got my eyes on the prize, but it's not looking too good. But I will say this, man. Bernie's campaign, even if he loses, it will be a blueprint for the next progressive. You know what I mean? The wrong things that he did, that will guide them. The good things that he did, that will guide them. You know what I mean? So we just got to keep our eyes on the prize, man, and just, you know, make sure our next progressive that comes, that runs for office really takes note to what happened with Bernie.
Yeah, thank you for your call, Brian. We got a few more calls here. We'll try to slide in before the end of the hour. Aaron, thank you for calling in. You had a question about PACs.
Okay, yeah. Actually, I've been looking for this for a while, so since you all focus on these things, can you point me to a website or an individual who is a PAC expert, a political action committee expert, because I have a question for them about PACs, and they'd probably, do you all consider yourselves PAC experts?
Well, what's the question? Let's go with the question first.
Okay, well, okay, all right. Have you all ever heard of the Constitution Party, maybe?
No.
Okay, well, see, what I'm looking for, and not just me, but a couple of us, we're jointly researching if there is a PAC political action committee that conducts itself like the Constitution Party, whose goal it is to get Constitution Party-like candidates into office, but in the form of a PAC.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. I would check out opensecrets.org, Center for Responsive Politics. You can learn more about PACs and all the dark money in our politics. We do have another caller on the line. Thank you for your call. JR, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Hey, thank you for the call. I mean, it's very disappointing results. At this point, I feel like I'm wondering, what does it mean to be a Democrat? I don't think there's any room in the Democratic Party for progressives. And I think progressives, there's just way too many barriers in trying to, raise a grassroots movement. Even now, I think one of the callers was questioning the results of the campaign, of the election. And there was just way too many barriers that were put up by the Democratic Party, that too many of our own people that we had to fight within the Democratic Party. I mean, you think about mainstream media from the left telling people on MSNBC that it'd be better for us to have Trump than Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
And then crowding the debate stage to try to keep Bernie from talking, because they know that the more he talks, the more people are going to, gravitate to his politics. Because, you had Buttigieg literally filibustering Sanders in the South Carolina debate just to keep him from talking, so that he couldn't explain to people how he wanted to pay for his policies. So I think, at this point, I think the progressives need to think about, how do we create a third party that represents our interests, so we don't have to spend. I mean, you had a guy that literally created history and won the first three states, won the popular vote in the first three states, something that no other candidate has ever been able to do. And it was making history in the campaign contributions, and people talked about him as if he was a loser, going in as if he hadn't done anything. Nobody was willing to recognize that.
Yeah, JR, thank you for your call. There are other parties out there in the United States. You might not have to form your own. There are previous caller mentioned the Constitution Party, so maybe that's where you can find a new home. Howie Hawkins, the Green Party candidate this time around, Party of Socialism and Liberation, and others are already out there looking for additional members. So also check out what else is out there. A few breaking pieces of news here before we turn to the top of the hour. One, Harvey Weinstein sentenced to 23 years in jail. No matter how much money he has to pay lawyers, he's going to spend quite a few days in jail. So some justice, obviously, no justice is going to happen for those people who've already been victimized by him, and sending somebody to jail in a cage doesn't make it any better for them. So thank you for your hard work. The other big news out there, the World Health Organization has now announced that the COVID-19 virus is a global pandemic. So things are not getting better quite yet. We have more for you after this break. We're here in Washington, D.C. You're listening to Political Misfits. We got a whole nother hour for you after this break. We'll be back after this.
Listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Bob Schlehuber, here with Jamarl Thomas. Get ready to continue going against the grain. 202-521-1320. We've been talking about the results from Mini Super Tuesday and voter breakdown in our weekly Revelation segment. Bernie Sanders is now speaking on the campaign trail there. I believe he is in Vermont, and once we are ready, we'll take you there to hear directly from Bernie Sanders. Here's Bernie Sanders speaking after a tough night there on Tuesday.
Tragically, we have a president today who is a pathological liar and who is running a corrupt administration. He clearly does not understand the Constitution of the United States and thinks that he is a president who is above the law. In my view, he is a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, and a religious bigot, and he must be defeated, and I will do everything in my power to make that happen. Last night, obviously, was not a good night for our campaign from a delegate point of view. We lost in the largest state up for grabs yesterday, the state of Michigan. We lost in Mississippi, Missouri, and Idaho. On the other hand, we won in North Dakota, and we lead the vote count in the state of Washington, the second largest state contested yesterday, with 67% of the votes having been counted. We are a few thousand votes on top. What became even more apparent yesterday is that while we are currently losing the delegate count, approximately 800 delegates for Joe Biden and 660 for us, we are strongly winning in two enormously important areas which will determine the future of our country. Poll after poll, including exit polls, show that a strong majority of the American people support our progressive agenda. The American people are deeply concerned about the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality in this country, and the American people want the wealthy and large profitable corporations to start paying their fair share of taxes. Overwhelming support for that. The American people understand that the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. They want to raise the minimum wage in this country to a living wage of at least $15 an hour. And the American people understand that if our kids are going to make it into the middle class of this country, we must make public colleges and universities and trade schools tuition free. The American people understand that we cannot continue a cruel and dysfunctional healthcare system. And it is amazing to me to see that even in conservative states like Mississippi.
That is Bernard Sanders, the Vermont senator, speaking after what he said there was a tough night for them, trying to spin it a little bit, some big win areas. I thought it was kind of interesting there. He didn't talk about the young voter. That's where we're winning. He was talking about the issues.
Yeah.
And in so many ways, it's like the issues don't matter, Bernie. You need to talk about who's coming out for you and why that's important to young voters like myself. Give us a call, 202-521-1320. We'll keep you up to speed here on what Senator Sanders talks about at his press conference. I wonder if he'll talk about the fact that this debate on Sunday, which was going to be kind of his, if anything, he needs to have a couple big pivot or two moments. And Bernie Sanders was ready. He said, let me stand next to Joe Biden. We've had a great time so far at these podiums under the lights over 2 hours. Joe Biden has to speak for 2 hours. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Next thing you know, they change it to a town hall kind of format where the two guys will be able to sit down. Next thing you know, now there's going to be no audience there because of the global pandemic we're now dealing with. I won't be surprised, I'm telling you this, Jamar, if they somehow cancel the debate on Sunday. We can't get a flight there, the TSA worker, the pilot,
I know they
the
want
staff, something or somebody happens that they're not able to have that event. Well, we turn to our next guest here. I thought of a political misfit who would be great to join us, and I thought of no one better than Kimberlyn Carter. Kimberlyn is an unapologetically black political strategist for progressive campaigns, focusing on economic justice, criminal justice reform, and climate justice. Kimberlyn, thank you for being with us.
Hello. I'm glad to be here. What a time to be alive. What an amazing time to be a political misfit.
There we go. There, you had a chance to hear Bernie Sanders talking about the results from yesterday, trying to focus on the issues. And as he alluded to, the exit polls overwhelmingly in all the states that voted yesterday, people were for a private end of private health insurance and a public option or a single payer system. So people clearly didn't vote on that simple issue. And he says, look, we're winning on issues, but we're not winning at the ballot box. What's happening, Kimberlyn?
What's happening with Bernie Sanders right now, or what's happening at our ballot boxes?
That's both. Yeah, I guess what is happening with Sanders, where does he go, is a great question. And the second great question there, as you alluded to, I think, is people care about these issues, but it doesn't seem like people are voting based on what issues they support.
Well, here's the truth of the matter. Whether you are a Sanders supporter or not, what you love about him is you love the fight in him. And no matter what they say about him, no matter what happens to him, even from a physical standpoint, he gets back up and he keeps fighting. And we are a nation, we love underdogs, whether people want to admit it or not, we love underdogs. We love to see a fighter. We love to see someone who speaks unapologetically. I think people didn't understand how much we love that until we got this Trump guy. But what we're seeing today is a man who's saying at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to the world, I am still in this fight because I've spent my whole life fighting for these issues, and I'm going to do it until the last day of the convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And that's what I expected him to do anyway.
And that's basically what this was about. I mean, this is him reprioritizing the campaign to let people know, I'm still in this contest, we're still in this particular race. And do you think this has more to do with setting the media narrative as opposed to just the delegate math itself?
Well, I think it is. Actually, I think it's a brilliant strategy. While I don't always agree with Jeff Weaver, I think this is a brilliant pivot. It is a brilliant pivot, and it is also a brilliant way for Bernie Sanders, who absolutely returned the heart and purpose back to the Democratic Party, to keep punching and punching and punching at the establishment to say, if you're going to go forward, you have to go forward, Democratic Party, with a new platform, and you better redesign this damn big tent you claim you have. So I'm with it.
But that's not what they're doing, though. I mean, in fact, the Democratic Party is doing the opposite of that. I mean, Sanders, even though he's been pushing for all of these big policy ideas, basically the results of this primary process has basically been, do you agree with Sanders or not? And that the party has decidedly, at the very least, the established power structure of the party has emphatically said we do not.
I can assure you that this piddly-poddly list of policy agendas that I saw on the Biden website the other day, as Bernie keeps punching, you are going to see that you're going to see that policy agenda change, and no matter, and I understand what you're saying, but I still believe that Bernie Sanders being on that stage, punching every day at Hillary Clinton in 2016, did indeed change the conversation, change the way that the Democratic Party began to think about policy and what is really important. He returned the heart to the matter on a lot of things that were never going to be a part of the conversation. $15 minimum wage, college debt, even though people claim that he doesn't speak a lot about African Americans directly when it comes to wealth generation and the economics of this nation, but he has, and his folks have pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. So I understand what you're saying, that it doesn't feel like it's happening, but trust me, he is crushing ground in the party. In the party establishment, and things and conversations are going on right now.
Yeah, he's moving the conversation, absolutely. And I think when we saw that first debate in Miami, it was just like, wow, Bernie Sanders' fingerprint is all over this. Human health is a human right. Every single candidate had to say that because Bernie Sanders moved that benchmark. And I think the biggest issue that Sanders and the movement overall within the electoral political sphere is there's just not enough people that are in elected positions of power to actually start changing the words into action. And so many times I've been distraught with people that are not Democrats that run as Democrats because they say the only way I can get elected is if I run as a Democrat. If I run as an independent, I'll get crushed and nobody will listen to me. And I'm telling them, cool, well, you're going to lose as a progressive Democrat or a liberal Democrat or a radical Democrat, whatever you want to call it. You're going to lose in the Democratic sphere, and you're only going to embolden those Democrats because they're going to co-opt your message along the way, but they're not going to turn that into action. And I think that's the biggest thing missing from a Bernie Sanders movement, and maybe a failure on his degree in some part, is they weren't able to do deeper down ballot organizing or touches via our revolution that the Democratic Party has built into place over decades now. I go back and tell the stories about Hillary Clinton in 2014 had people with Hillary Clinton cardboard cutouts and candy at every little political event. So for years before she even announced, they had people already laying that groundwork. And so when Sanders came out of nowhere, he was able to take off in kind of the stratosphere of national discourse, but at a very grassroots level. Nobody had been out there for years on end. Nobody had gotten elected off of his brand. Nobody was saying, I'm a Bernie Sanders Democrat for the last 10 years. To have that infrastructure. So when he does those grassroots meetings, does those little coffee meetings, Elizabeth Warren was trying to build out the same thing through the Progressive Change Campaign Coalition and doing candidate trainings and knowing a lot of people. She was doing a lot of down ballot calls and touches. And I think that's what allowed her to stay in the race as long as she did some of that work. But ultimately, when you don't take those words, Kimberly, and this is why I really get concerned, is no matter what Muriel Bowser tells me about what she cares about the people and the children of Washington, D.C. as a Democratic mayor, the second she gets to go and endorse Michael Bloomberg, she's going to go endorse Michael Bloomberg. And at that point, you're saying, well, we're trying to get you to stop and frisk here in this city. And you're basically now backing a person that's apologized for it, but you haven't apologized for it. But yet you say you care about the people. So it's very easy, I think, to take what Sanders is saying and then how to actually enact it and how quickly you enact it and how authentically you try to enact it. That, for me, is what the Democratic Party is missing. That's, for me, is why I'm a misfit and I'm not in any hurry to go back to the Democratic Party, is because it does feel a lot like they know how to co-opt social movements. They know how to co-opt that language, but do they actually turn it into electoral power or voting power or legislative power? That's what I have not seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think all of us are looking at all of these campaigns and sort of asking ourselves, what is your turnout model? While a lot of people were excited to see that that Mike Bloomberg put $2 million into the collective PAC over there with Stephanie and Quentin James to do some black voter registration, we go, oh, here we go again. How much money can we put into voter registration, but we don't put any money into true voter mobilization? So you can register all the people that you want. If you don't have some type of true turnout model, you're going to still keep getting the same results over and over again. And I think that that's the one thing that I don't know if it's a blind spot of the Sanders team, a blind spot of Jeff Weaver and his team or whatever, but I don't understand how he has not been able to take this just wonderful groundswell of youthful supporters and move them into being this just this amazing ground team, this amazing mobilization type of apparatus or network. I don't understand how that keeps.
Yeah, I think it's a failure on their end, but on the other failure, not until this cycle here in Washington, D.C. had we had publicly financed campaigns. So for every dollar you now raise when you run for office, you get $5 of matching dollars. I ran a race in here, worked on a race, man, 4 to 6 years ago, and we raised the campaign $17,000, and we lost to the competitor who had like $250,000.
Wow.
So who am I to go run and why am I turning to electoral? I'll just organize with my communities. We'll bring people together. We don't have that money. I'm not going to spend all this time trying to fundraise all day, every day, just to get squashed. And eventually, the person actually won on the second time around. They're able to raise a little bit more money. They still got to spend 7-1, but to win in the electoral sphere, because the electoral politics in America are so rigged. Not only on finances, but on this other issue, Kimberlyn, is also just voter suppression that's taking place. So you're asking people at the grassroots level in the communities that Bernie Sanders, I believe, would most impact via his policies to somehow try to play ball in the electoral sphere when we're getting crushed there. And one place in that happening is voter suppression. I wanted to talk to you, since you in the state that's had more attention on this issue there in Georgia than anywhere else. But yesterday in Kansas City, Missouri, Mayor Quinton Lucas, who is a Democrat, said he was turned away from a polling station where he had voted for more than a decade because he did not appear on the voter rolls. Lucas had actually made a film right before he went to go vote about how important it was to go out and vote, and then he went to vote and he gets turned away. He said, even though I've voted there for 11 years, including for myself 4 times, I couldn't vote. And if the mayor got turned away, think about everyone else. We got to do better. In North Dakota, Kimberlyn, I'm sure you also saw the long lines and freezing temperatures there in Grand Forks and Fargo. And reports from East Lansing, Michigan, showed lines of students waiting on average for 3 hours to vote. A lot of conversation after Iowa's inability to get the results back in a timely manner. But in so many ways, people have kind of brushed by these long lines and these failures of the voting process here in the Democratic primary. I know a lot of the focus is around Republicans and voter suppression in the general elections. What about at these elections taking place right now? This seems rather concerning if you're for democracy, which really prides itself on people having an ability to voice their voice through the ballot box.
Well, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the fact that last week a judge ruled that our governor, who was the Secretary of State, that all of about 30,000 ballots that were literally rejected on just real BS, that all of those voters now have the legal right to come and to correct or to do make corrections to their ballots. Now, keep in mind, this is from an election that was literally a year ago. And, and because the vote difference, well, we know that it's not really going to matter that much. But just imagine that we are still in fights for people who voted 3 and 4 years ago because of how oppressive the voter suppression is here in Georgia, not just in Georgia, just across the Southeast, period. And out of all of these, we've gone through a year of almost 10 different debates, we have heard very few of any of these candidates talk about voter suppression or voting in this country. Now, they love to, hit the high point of, well, when I get in, I'm going to restore, the Voting Rights Act. Okay, yeah, we hear that, but, you can't. That's not something that you can wave with a magic wand and do either. But we haven't heard any of them really talk about this voter suppression and that it's not just from a Southern lens. Like you're saying, here we are now, and we're in the Midwest. We're in quote-unquote Yankee areas, and it's still the same thing. Think about Hervis Rogers down in Texas that literally stood in line for 7 hours to cast his vote. I mean, there has to be a larger rising up of all of us who are sick and tired of this voter suppression, speaking truth to power, and pushing on this issue every day, all day. And we have to also look at even some of the simple nuances of how these things happen. I'm sure you've heard of souls to the polls. So here in the state of Georgia, what the Secretary of State has decided to do, so Sunday voting, so we have one mandatory Saturday voting. And so depending upon what county you live in, if your Board of Election supervisor decides, oh, well, we're going to have more than one, then he or she can do so, or just only do the mandatory one, right? Well, for the Sunday voting, that's purely a choice of your county level Board of Elections supervisor. So in my home county, which is literally 60% African American, because of the suppression, because of the power structure in my home county in the South, can you believe that we don't have a soul to the poll Sunday? In a city, in a community that's 60% Black?
Yeah, I can believe it. I mean, yeah, I know, sadly, quite a bit of concern as we head into more voting around the corner. We have a few calls here stacked up. Thank you for your patience. Let's get to those now. Jamar, Frank, you wanted to talk on Political Misfits. Thank you for calling in.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I just wanted to, I was watching another program yesterday, and they mentioned that Nick Brown is holding a convention in Wisconsin at the same time as the Democratic National Convention. And I just wanted to encourage as many people as progressives as possible that they should try to attend this meeting. I'm going to be there. I'm going to Wisconsin, so I'm definitely going to be there. The Democratic Party of FDR is dead. It's basically like a dead tree. It's still standing, but the inside is completely rotted out. They do not want us. That is apparent. So it's time for Plan B.
July 13th through 16th will be quite interesting. Frank, thank you for the call. Hopefully we'll get a chance to report there live from Milwaukee for the Democratic Convention. We have Tyrese on the call. Tyrese, thank you for being a frequent caller to Political Misfits. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. Hey, Bernie Sanders, you bet not give up. March 15th coming around. This has got to take place, okay? You have a large demographic going to be watching that program March the 15th. Latino Americans will be watching it because Univision have a high number of Latinos watching their programs, and Telemundo too. Okay.
Tyrese, thank you. I still don't think this. I'm going to go out there and say the debate doesn't happen on Sunday.
You don't think so?
I'm just telling you, the Democratic Party. Too often I put trust in them, and every time they do it, they throw me another curveball. So keep them coming.
I do think they want to hide Biden, so I do think that's there. But canceling a debate just seems so big.
Big times, man.
Yeah.
Big times call for big measures. Charles, you're on the air here. You have a few questions on reparations. Thank you for calling Political Misfits. What's going on?
Thanks for the call. Here's a question I want you. If Bernie Sanders, first of all, free college, Medicare for all, not a warmonger, he should have been an automatic. But if Bernie Sanders was for reparations for slavery, like Tom Steyer and Marianne Williamson are, would he have done better with black voters? I remember the last debate with Tom Steyer, and he stood on the stage and said he's the only one on the stage that was for reparations for slavery, and he challenges everybody else on the stage to be for it. And the moderator said, okay, next question. And nobody said, they couldn't say anything. Question.
Yeah. Kimberlyn Carter, what's your thoughts on that last question there?
Well, I think I think that what the caller is asking is definitely a critical question that we have to ask all of these folks. But I think the other part that when we talk about black folk, and I am a black woman, and we talk about are reparations on the ballot, and how do other black folks see the ballot? Do they see reparations on the ballot? I am just not convinced that that is the case. And I think, and that is because I heartily blame the CBC for this watered down study committee kind of blue ribbon committee thing that we're all so sick and tired of. And so the people, black people themselves, have not had a chance to really create an appetite for having a real conversation around reparations because of these watered down committees and versions, which has, of course, not helped itself to make it to the debate stage. I think it's only been a question or topic maybe once or twice, and that was when Julian Castro was still on the stage.
Let me ask you real quick. I wanted to argue that reparations was a winning issue. And I know that it polls at like 25% of people. It's a very low issue. But for Julian Castro, who I thought was one of the best of all of them on actual like governability and policies and statesmanship, whatever else you wanted and stuff. So obviously things are going on that was saying to the Democratic Party, we don't want to drift anywhere to the left, and Julian Castro is to the left. But it seemed like, why not be a visionary at this time? Why not be out on an issue that isn't polling well and say, you know what, I'm going to carry that issue. I'm going to strap myself to like a rocket and take off with it. And yet everyone turned away from it the second they couldn't. And for fairness, the fact that every single one of those candidates in one way or another said they're for reparations is remarkable, because the Democratic Party, just because they're the Democratic Party where black people vote, there's been times on those stages and those debates where people said, no, absolutely, I'm against reparations. And that was okay with the Democratic Party. So again, it's where it's shifted. It hasn't done any policies or actually addressed it. But Kimberly, is there not a time, is there no space to be bold with policies that are maybe not in the majority right now, but to take them and make them and sell them to people?
Well, let me say this. The established black political are the folks who are trying to tell everybody about, all these black voters, I keep it, they're pragmatists. Oh, black voters are so practical, and they're just, no, the truth of the matter is that black folks understand white supremacy better than anybody does. And so the idea of reparations almost becomes, like this Disney thing, reimagine America. And so when you place that topic there, you're asking black folks who are very understanding of the cruelty and the blind sight, the blindness of white supremacy to slavery as being something that is a stain that should be repaired. That black folk in this country, it's not a matter of deserve. We earn the right to be able to ask to be repaired for the brutality done. That the black literati won't have placed it in this sort of nuanced space that creates a model where you can't be bold and unapologetic about it, because it's not bold and unapologetic. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have a caller here, there, and speaking to that issue, yeah, it's a lack of imagination, and we've talked a lot about that on this show. This lack of creative, moral imagination that says we can think beyond our current politics and have more, and that's been squashed in people either through the media, through politicians, through the pulling of arts and civil education in schools. But top down, this country is just really struggling with to think outside of its own self. Even the Joe Bidens of the world, when we say we're paying way more for healthcare than anywhere else in the world, and we get less returns, but he goes, but we're America.
We're Americans.
We're Americans. And it's like, this is why we can't have nice things. Keith Crawford, thank you for calling in. You're one of our favorites here on Political Misfits. What's on your mind today?
Okay, listen, I just want to talk about the oligarchy. How could I put it? We have an oligarchic election system, and it's represented by the DNC and the RNC. Now, what the Democrats are confronted with is not a problem, which presupposes a solution, but a quandary, which means there's only one way out. And we know that the polls for 2016 and 2012 show that Bernie is the only one that can beat Trump. But that just wouldn't do, because then the oligarchy, the undemocratic Democratic Party, wouldn't be able to rig it. So faced with that, they've decided that they would rather lose with Biden than to win with Sanders. And I guess my conclusion is that it should be no surprise that the DNC doesn't want a debate between Bernie and Biden at the closing of this election, because then it would expose his cognitive inabilities or his declining cognitive abilities. And I just wanted you to comment on that.
Yep, that's what I am guessing at. And to speak of the oligarchy, these Democratic primaries as well. I mean, Michigan was the big prize yesterday. 1.5 million people or so vote in Michigan. You have over 7 million voting age people in that state. And so the small percentage of people, this process is just rigged in a way that if you're not a Democrat or Republican, you have no say in then who you vote for in the general. It's one. I mean, in Iowa, it's like 6% of people participated in the Democratic primary. And for me, that's crazy to think that like that's a democracy. Democracy for me is having a range of choices, and people are then able to pick amongst those choices who best represent them. Kimberly, I'm curious, do you think the debate happens on Sunday? And if Joe Biden's a nominee and their strategy is don't put him in front of cameras, how do you stay away from cameras when you're running for president of the United States?
Well, I guess I need to go ahead and make me a little meme with the DNC's phone number on it to put on all my social media to start telling everybody to start bombarding their switchboard with "you better have a debate, son." Because here is, and I wanted to just say something real quick about the orange infestation at 1600. When we talk about we may use the words reimagine, and we talk about wanting to see those words reimagine, imagining things being bigger and great. And so I think that that was one of the things that he did with this Make America Great Again branding. And it is exactly that, just done in the way that the Trump folks put it together. And we are missing that point of helping the nation to dream bigger, to have more hope, to believe that we can do bigger things than countries like Scandinavia and Finland that would actually sit in the state of Georgia, right? But about the debate has to happen. We cannot afford to continue to tell our young people that their choice in a candidate does not matter. Bottom line.
You don't agree with Representative Clyburn there that the DNC should just pack things up and call it for Bernie? Or call it for Biden, excuse me.
Hell no, I don't.
We have one more call here. Kimberly, if you can hang on with us for one more second here. We have Mary on the line. Mary, are you going to hold the funeral here for the Democratic Party?
Hell no.
Okay.
This particular party, yes. Mr. Clyburn, I already called his office and tell him thank you very much for that step and fetch it move. I'm not liking that. Right now, I feel like the Democratic Party lied to us. They've been lying for 20 years. Anyway, they did a U-turn. Did we not flip the House with the campaign of Bernie? New Green Deal, blah, 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 blah. Everything was Bernie. They won the House. It's like, oh, thank you, Bernie. Go to hell now. Bye. This is not going to happen. I've already started calling everybody on my list. Miss Nancy gets a call from me twice a day. You better damn well have that debate, or I think we have nothing left except anarchy.
Yep.
We don't have a Congress anymore. We probably have people in office right now that are positive with the virus, but oh no, they're okay. This is not right anymore. And I think I'm ready to go downtown with a baseball bat. I've had it. There's nothing logical that they can do. I watched them cheat in 2016. What is it? It's like it's okay to cheat in front of our faces now?
Yep. No, I hear you, Mary. A lot of righteous anger there. Kimberly Carter, for me, a lot of it was, and this is taking a kind of a year back, and, I said, look, you need Bernie Sanders if you want to beat Donald Trump, because you're going to need to get the people like Mary and others who are disillusioned. They're out of it. They don't want to fight anymore. But look, Bernie Sanders is asking, he'll turn out. And the rest of the Democratic Party, longtime Democrats who maybe aren't in the establishments, they're not getting power, but they just vote Democrat. They always have. They don't maybe think that much about it. They're going to vote Democrat regardless. And you're going to get some people as well that are Republicans that don't want to vote Trump. And that was kind of your combination, is that Sanders would lead kind of the left-wing insurgency, and that the center and others and longtime Democrats would vote with him. And you see the swing counties, I think of the 250 or so, 300 Obama, Trump counties that were swinging. And I thought Donald Trump captured this kind of populist energy that Bernie Sanders could say, look, I'm the true populist, swing back to me, and the rest of the Democratic Party would fall in line. Well, here what the Democratic Party seemingly is arguing is, no, we're going to go with Joe Biden. Biden's more aligned with our values, our policies, kind of the history of the party. He's going to somehow win a lot of Republicans away from Trump, plus the never Trumpers, plus the center. For me, I don't get how Joe Biden brings across the Marys of the world or brings that left. And I guess I'm not really seeing how Andrew Yang said the math adds up for Joe Biden. I'm not really sure how the math adds up for Joe Biden to beat Donald Trump without Bernie Sanders having to ask his supporters to come along and hold their nose. But at the same time, once Sanders is out of this thing, I don't know if he has that same political cash to tell his voters to turn out for Biden, and they simply might just stay at home. Is the Democratic Party concerned about Sanders voters staying at home? Do they have a plan to win them, or is that just not the focus right now, and they'll deal with that in July when it is obviously well too late?
Well, now, I will tell you straight up from all of the folks that I have communication with who are in Biden team or all these things, all of them, it is a serious concern to them about the Sanders coalition and how they rather begin to engage, speak to, build a bridge, build a community that embraces these folks. There is no way that we can ever afford to throw away our young people. There is no way that we can afford to, I think I was reading something that said every 18 minutes a Latino young person turns 18 or something of that nature. There is no way that we can throw away our young people. It is the thing, Bob, that gives me nightmares and keeps me up at night, because we saw what happened in 2016 where black young people said, no, we ain't voting for Trump or Hills. We out of here. We're not doing it. Lowest black youth turnout in a presidential election in over 20 years. So we can't afford to make this bad gamble again. I'm like you. I don't see how anybody is celebrating on November 4th without the Sanders movement and the Sanders coalition at the table, driving, not sitting in the back seat,
yep,
in the front seat. There is no other way. Bernie Sanders is the only candidate, no matter what they say up to this point, who truly has a coalition that looks like the so-called beloved Obama coalition. He's the only person who has been able to do that and to inspire that. And it should not be ignored, and it cannot be ignored. And so the fact that he has determined that he's going to stay on that stage and he's going to keep punching up is exactly what everybody in this country needs to see, and it should be welcomed, not diminished.
Couldn't agree more. That was Kimberlyn Carter, an unapologetically black political strategist for progressive campaigns. Kimberlyn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
With that, we'll be back with our revelations of the week here on Political Misfits. We're back after this. So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show by any means necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Welcome to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. Let's get ready to go against the grain. So my name is Jamal Thomas. I'm here with Bob Schlehuber, and you know that sound. That is our spooky Revelations segment sound. Today we're talking about mind control. And I don't mean mainstream media, folks. Boom, 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 zing. No, we're talking about mind-reading technologies that Scientific America tells us are fast approaching. They can tell what you're thinking through your scalp. Now, this is the technology that I am eager for, and that's to put it mildly. Every so often you see these technologies where a person puts on a helmet and they're moving around in this VR segment. No, I'm waiting for the technology where they put a little thing on the back of your spine or on your temples, and the electrical signals that go to your brain are automatically read by the machine, and there's a spoofing of those signals that are going to your brain that goes into a machine that also gives this notion of movement, dimensionality, or even feelings. Oh, this is so excited. So the story in Scientific America begins this way. The ability to detect electrical activity in the brain through the scalp and to control it will soon transform medicine and change society in profound ways. Pattern of electrical activity in the brain can reveal a person's cognition, normal and abnormal. New methods to stimulate specific brain circuits can treat neurological and mental illnesses and control behavior. In crossing this threshold of great promise, difficult ethical quandaries confront us. Now, I remember a scientist that was doing an experiment where he would try to spoof the signals, meaning every time he moved his arm, he would get an electrical signal that corresponded to the movement of his arm or movement of his leg. And the goal of it was to see that if you can send that signal or receive that signal, is it possible to put that signal either in a machine and send it back to a specimen, or for that matter, to get the machine to be able to know what those movements themselves mean. And you can think about this from the standpoint of a digital environment. Let's say I move my arm. What does that look like from the standpoint of an electrical impulse? And if you had a machine that could also know what that meant, that if I'm moving my arm, does the machine pick it up as if I'm within a computer system moving your arm or blinking an eye or jumping or running? This is fascinating in regards to what this could mean, but there are also terrifying realities of what this could mean. Imagine being burlap sacked and tortured. Imagine being captured and worked over, and in the very next morning, you find yourself a complete body in order for the process to repeat itself. Yes, there are amazing things that can come of this, but there are also terrifying things. The story in Scientific America points out that we already use chemical screenings to, say, detect dangerous cholesterol levels and allow us to take action. So now, in experimental research destined to soon enter medical practice, monitoring brain activity can reveal issues like neurological illness, ADHD, or schizophrenia. It can also highlight strengths and weaknesses, personality traits, and likely challenges, even as far as determining how easy a child would be to learn to read. In the case of the story's author, the learning foreign languages would be difficult. Now, being able to take action to change cholesterol levels or iron supplements is one thing, but what happens if the person begins the direction of their lives or directing their children's lives based on these revelations about what will be easy or difficult for them? Will it turn people away from fields that they will need? Will it keep people who think differently about some fields from ever bothering to engage with them because they've been told it's not their strength? Then there's the next step, mind reading. Scientists at Carnegie Mellon are using the MRI brain imaging to decipher what a person is thinking. Now, I've seen these machines in action, Basically, a person could be thinking of a horse, or a person can be thinking of a elephant, and the machine would give a probability of what it believes that the person is thinking about. This is fascinating. By using machine learning to analyze complex patterns of activity in a person's brain when they think of a specific number or an object, read a sentence, experience a particular emotion, or learn a new type of information, the researchers can read minds and know the person's specific thought and emotion. Knowing what a person thinking is predicting, it leads to predicting what that person might do. The Carnegie Mellon team says that if a person is contemplating suicide, just watching how the person's brain responds and hearing words like death or happiness, where does that leave us? Look, I am fascinated by this. When you see Star Trek and you see like the holodeck, and you would have these guys, running and jumping and everything else, and I always think that's too much work. Like, basically, you don't need that much work. Every experience that takes place happens in your brain. It happens in this, this cavity. And assuming for the moment that our thoughts are in our heads and that this is just kind of, we're not consciousness that is creating the body behind it. Well, if that's true, you don't need a holodeck. Basically, you just need something that can interact with the electrical impulses in your brain and give a corresponding action based on the reaction to it. Meaning you create a world, you have those electrical impulses take place in that digital world, and you give feedback mechanisms to make that person think that they're in some kind of reality frame. I am eagerly awaiting this.
Oh, yeah. I'm like nervously awaiting it.
Yes,
Is that
too.
a better phrase? I don't know. I guess I think of a few different things. I think of one, I think of the movie WALL-E, where at the end of the day, you're like, where are all the humans? Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen WALL-E in the last 15 years, it's on you, not on us. But basically finally find all the humans and they're floating on like blob kind of surface things, and they all got fat because they're just hooked up to VR machines and they just watch television all day and they're like basically happy. But at the same time, then I think of like the VR mind control things working. I was watching a clip on senior homes had it, and there's so much senior isolation. If you know a senior with the coronavirus out there and about, go check in on them, and just in general without the virus, like check in on seniors and engage with them and hang out.
Yeah.
Really cool, fascinating people. That's my promotion for seniors. But it gave these people in these nursing homes a way to engage the seniors, right? Because they can just put on the VR headset and they can see and like experience the world. Another concern again, this is where like Facebook comes in. Facebook last September, as you may remember, they acquired Control Labs, a company that makes a wristband capable of transmitting electronic signals from the brain into computer input.
Yes.
And they spent somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion. This is the top 5 acquisition for Facebook of all time. So anytime Facebook's acquiring something and purchasing it, then I'm like, well, now I'm super nervous. But then I get excited again because I think of like the Matrix, and if there's like a chip in the back of my head that you could just plug in and like I can just download languages.
Yeah.
Like that feels like the natural progression of this stuff. That sounds really cool.
But it also means that you might be able to be influenced by that also. Like,
but that sounds scary. And
Yeah,
then
that's
like it's like,
terrifying.
but then you can easily find where I may have like a potential place for a stroke. That sounds awesome. But then it goes back to like the predictive policing thing, where if like you're thinking about wanting to physically hurt somebody, if you felt really angry and it's just a kind of a moment, but you have a way to count to 10 and breathe and you relax, well, that might not come because you've already been arrested for thinking you were going to go assault somebody. So for every time I'm like super excited, Jamar, I'm like really nervous on the other end.
It goes both ways, right? I mean, it does go both ways. Look, one of the most interesting things that I find is a complex society, and how do you get people evolved to live in a complex society? Meaning, if you have all of these different races, cultures, genders, and everything else, how do you get people to live in that society in a way where they can accommodate the differences among other people? I think the way you do that is by having those people to live in those experiences. Many of the people who work at this office have traveled around the world, and many of us have a certain point of view of the world that was experienced through that traveling, but most of Americans don't. What does the system look like if you have people that can go into life after life after life and all of these different experiences in order to come away with a larger contextual point of view of the world because you've lived in all of these different places? Like, there are some amazing potentials for it, but like you said, for every potential, there's also some amazing problematic hang-up that can come along with it. I mean, imagine somebody being hacked with, some kind of brain electrical device that you have in your head, and that person being hacked in some way, and that person thinks there's some kind of UFO invasion, and they're like, like just weird stuff that goes on because of the way that how they perceive the world versus the signals that are coming into their brain.
Yeah.
Like all sorts of strange stuff starts coming.
Yeah, and like what it means for somebody who's like quote unquote brain dead. So if you like can't physically move, is there a way? And that goes to, I don't know if you've seen the Black Mirror episode. Basically, they were able to take, so the Black Museum, I think,
Yeah.
where they were looking at these like crazy technological tools
Yeah.
over the years that had gone mad, and they had the one where you could take somebody who was like completely in a vegetative state, and you can pull their brain out
Yeah.
and you put it into like the
cookie.
The
It's
cookie.
called the cookie. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, like stuff like that, all of a sudden, where if somebody is brain dead, is this the technology that allows for their brain to be woken back up and connected to something?
Yeah.
That's really cool too. I feel like we're gonna have all the coolest. Okay. Yeah,
Or in that episode where people could be tortured in perpetuity.
There's always torture.
Forever.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but usually death is an
Forever.
escape. But I mean, look, the moment that they could create the cookie thing, at that point you have a digital experience or digital reality, and you can do whatever you want to that particular reality. You're God for all intents and purposes. If you want that person to believe that they're somewhere for 1,000 years, or if you want them to feel like they're in pain for 1,000 years, you can do any of that.
And for all we know, we're already hooked up to these machines, living in a different reality that we don't even know about.
That is very true.
Now I'm freaked out. Let's take a break, Jamal. I need to take a breath. You freaked me out. Political Misfits live in Washington, D.C. We're going to talk about COVID-19, as the kids are calling it on the streets. We're going to be back after this.
Is that what the kids are called?
What's the most important hour of the day? It's the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon. On this show, we don't just deliver the latest headlines, we divide the real from the fake. Tune in to hear from some of the most brilliant political minds of today, get in-depth news and analysis that goes beyond the surface and dig straight into the details. Set your clock to the Critical Hour for a news perspective unlike any of those other guys. Tune in to the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon, weekdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and catch us on Facebook Live. You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. We got 10 more minutes for you. If you want more, we're here daily from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Progressive Soapbox. You can check us out on YouTube, Facebook, 105.5 FM in Washington, D.C., or you can download a fancy app by Sputnik, get all the news from Sputnik News, listen to our great programming that we have here throughout the day. We did want to get to the latest from COVID-19, the coronavirus. The problem with calling it the coronavirus, and people need to stop, is that like coronavirus is just a classification of viruses. So in 5 years from now, when we have another coronavirus, everybody's going to be like, it's the same thing. Don't we have the solution to it? We're like, no, this one's COVID-19 and the next one's Mobid 2025, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, we do that with flu every year. The flu is a different flu all the time.
But we always call it
we
flu.
manage.
That's Michelle Whitty,
We'll manage
our
with the
producer.
coronavirus.
I haven't even introduced you yet, Michelle. Michelle is
Sorry.
ready to get to the microphone. Our wonderful producer who takes all of your calls and patches you through. Michelle, what's happening?
Not a lot. I'm freed from the glass cage back there.
You wanted to come out. Luckily, Ryan is still in the glass cage producing and engineering our show. Big shout out to Ryan and Dimitri. Michelle, I mentioned earlier at the top of the hour, the World Health Organization has officially declared COVID-19 a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
That's right, a pandemic now here across the world. There are at least 1,000 coronavirus cases in the U.S. and at least 31 people have died. And now finally governments and organizations are starting to react. More than a dozen universities and colleagues have canceled in-person classes, including Georgetown University here in Washington, D.C. A bunch of big news talk shows, a bunch of shows talking about what to do if the coronavirus reaches their town. In one small town in New York, the National Guard will begin enforcing and supporting a 1-mile containment area in New Rochelle, New York. They'll clean public areas and deliver food to residents. California counties have begun banning mass gatherings. Chicago just canceled its St. Patrick's Day parade. And I can hear bro tears raining as I speak. Little green tears into the river.
Guess what, Bob?
What's that, Michelle?
They're also not going to dye the river green.
They're not going to dye the river green?
Yeah, they announced that after they said they were canceling the parade. So
I wanted my hometown of Rockford, Illinois this year was going to be the first year that they dyed the Rock River green. So I'll have to check in to see. It's an exciting year for the Irish out there. I'm sure they'll still get drunk somewhere, though.
Oh, for sure.
They'll celebrate in
Absolutely.
their own ways. We have some other news here. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, told the U.S. House Oversight Committee that we ain't seen nothing yet. He was asked, is the worst yet to come? He said, yes, things will get worse. The bottom line, it's going to get worse. And I was telling you guys that story. So basically, I think the Trump administration's hope is that it just goes away.
I mean, at this point, like another thing that the director of NAID said was he advised that NBA games not be played in front of actual crowds. Like there are a bunch of talk shows that are not going to be taping with live studio audiences. I mean, we are being directly told, hey, it is a bad idea to gather in big crowds while this virus is spreading basically unchecked. So also maybe don't go visit your elderly relatives
right?
if
Call
they
them and see
don't
how
have
they're feeling.
coronavirus
Call
because
them
those are the
on
people you need to
the
worry
phone.
about, Bob.
The most, right?
So don't check on seniors. Wow, I see
Don't
where
check
your
on
guys'
seniors,
hearts
yeah.
are. Well, I'm gonna go check on the seniors that are close and that I love.
Wear a
Maybe
mask.
from a 3-foot distance,
Or just call.
or just call.
I'll just call.
That's nice.
Yeah,
Nice of you
just
to
call.
call. Yeah, concerning here as people across the country try to figure out what to do, and a lot of panic shopping has already taken place. I was trying to find some hand sanitizer along with the rest of the world the other day. Obviously, I was thinking about myself, but also we were working with some vendors who work out on the streets here in Washington, D.C., sell food, taking a lot of money. And so they can become a vector of the disease. And in many ways, they're extremely important at this moment because they actually keep an eyes on the street and see who is in need of resources, and they're often a vector of communication. So a very vital and important population, but an at-risk population, and they need the hand sanitizer more than anyone because they don't have the opportunity to stop and constantly go wash their hands inside, where a lot of people, if you like live at a house, just wash your hand with soap and you're fine. You don't need to then use hand sanitizer. And I think the underlying story too is the process of us creating the super germ. Like, because none of us, we're going to use so much hand sanitizer that, like,
I had not
all
even.
viruses are going to be completely fine.
Oh,
after
yeah,
we
we're
become
all going to
immune
get
it.
drug-resistant gonorrhea now.
Pace yourself, my people. And so we're out there looking for it. Hand sanitizer is off all of the shelves. You can't find it anywhere. Then you say, well, I'll do it myself. I can mix 70% rubbing alcohol with, like, glycerin, and that will do it. Well, those products are gone, too. And this is where you really see the failures of capitalism, that we distribute all of it based on if you can buy it or not. And when like people actually need these items, they can't afford it, they can't get it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you need socialism, because then everybody has like whatever it is, your little coupon to go get your hand sanitizer, and then we actually equally distribute. Because you see pictures of people, they're like joking on Facebook. They'll take a picture of like 12 bottles of hand sanitizer and like 30 bottles of soap. They're like, well, I'm good for the next year or two at least.
Yeah,
and
but
it's like, well, what?
soap is not actually the cure for the virus.
Right.
It only helps if everybody is using it. Did you guys see the one heartwarming story that I have seen about this? It was I feel bad because I'm going to not remember either the name of the reporter or the name of the company. But a reporter yesterday, he did a story about how the company that owns the Olive Garden chain, it's called Darnell Foods or Dardell Foods. They were not offering either paid leave or like no sick days, no health insurance for their companies. And it's a huge company, right? And they employ a lot of people who handle your food all day, every day, and they can't afford to take time off, and they don't have any health insurance if they do take the time off. And within hours of this story coming out, the company announced that they were, from this moment, going to be offering those benefits to all of their employees.
Really?
It's like, it's
There's a
what,
win.
a glimmer, right? Of course, it should have been offered from the start, but it gave me a little sense of satisfaction and happiness.
Yeah,
So, like,
it's interesting
maybe
to
sometimes
see.
reporting
It's
will do
interesting to
something.
see like responses of United and Delta, and I think Avis, and I'm thinking of the other companies that I'm like randomly on their email list for because I've frequented their company at some point or another. Everybody's like, buy it, and if you want to cancel it, change it, whatever you want, you can do that. I'm like, wow, this is like
Wow.
awesome now to actually be able to have like flexible travel dates and stuff. So buy your ticket and then just move it to later in the year if you want, but incredibly low prices right now.
Hey, look what happens when they need us.
I know, right? I know.
Yeah, and then on the other note, you also see on other fronts of where people like just aren't prepared whatsoever, and they do rely on people that shouldn't. I was telling the story to you guys off air, but our activists and some organizers, they said, look, we have a lot of people that are impoverished or can't take time off, and they have kids, and if the kid gets sick, who takes care of the kid because they need to go to work? And so in a kind of a panic moment, they called our local council member and they said, well, how do we get these extra resources? What's the plan of action? And the person was like, you know what? You should call Bob. They said, call me because he's a community organizer. He might know people that are sitting on hand sanitizer. And I'm saying to myself, like, I have a day job. Any organizing I do is like after my radio show. And you're an elected official who gets paid six figures in a city with a $15.5 billion budget. And you have no idea what to do but send them to the local like activists and like your neighbors. And ultimately, like, that is why we need to like rely on one another and not always the government. I'm a big proponent of decentralized organizing and organizing away from these people, because these people are set. If the developer called and they need a quick permit at the regulatory affairs to build something, oh yeah, on top of it, hand sanitizer just to keep our community safe from the flu. Don't have those answers yet. Wild stuff, guys. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone that called in. Michelle Whitty for popping in at the end of the hour. Kimberlyn Carter and Christine Hendricks from Missouri. We're going to be back with another show tomorrow here in Washington, D.C. Thank you for listening to Political Misfits. Now get back to organizing.